Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. I'm Kathy Holmes. I'm your host, and I am so happy that you joined us on this very fine Monday. So thanks for tuning in. My guest today is going to really give us some understanding on what healing might look like. And she has an organization called the Healing Institute. I don't know if it's an organization, but she's going to unpack it all for us. Her name, Permelia Parham. Welcome to the booth. How are you, Permelia?
Thank you so much, Kathy. I am delighted to be here and I am very well. Yes, thank you.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the Healing Institute? I love it sounds very like a school. It sounds like it's an educational thing when the word institute is beside it. Can you break it open for us and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yes, absolutely. It's a virtual global hub of holistic practitioners, and we are out to heal the world. So we are really looking. The reason I called it an institute is because I'm really passionate about educating people about how to
Mm,
be well and how to stay well. We're all on a health journey. So we really want to let people know there are different ways to be well and stay well. And one of the ways, of course, is to engage with holistic practitioners.
yeah.
And we're still in the education process for mainstream society to understand that. You know, so many decades we've been conditioned that if something was wrong with you, you went to the doctor fixed you or gave you something that would help. And that actually isn't as true as we have been led to believe. The holistic practitioners that I have at the Healing Institute really get to the root cause. So if you have a pain, why do you have that pain? If you
Hmm.
have some emotional distress, why do you have that emotional distress? So all of the modalities that are on the Healing Institute, and we have about 30, we have about 10 practitioners right now and about 30 modalities. And all of the practitioners are just heart-centered, really care about the clients and really want to get to what that root cause is that is causing whatever it might be, physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual.
Wow. Well, and we need all four of those components and actually to be a really well-rounded individual to be able to make sure that when they're all in balance, then our life is really quite comfortable. But when they're not in balance, there are some concerns for sure. I've never understood there being about 30 of these kinds of practitioners, and I don't mean as individuals, but the bodies of work. When you talk about the practitioners, what kind of practitioners do you have?
Well, we have practitioners that are also coaches. So when you go on the website, you'll find I've created 5 different categories. So there's
Okay.
emotional healing, energy healing, therapies, integrated healing, and coaching. So I call everybody a practitioner. Some of the coaches, of course, just call themselves coaches, but they all are coming from a holistic point of view and a holistic way of looking at what is required by the client. And so we have a conscious breathing facilitator. We have people who are looking after autoimmune disease. The work that I do, the modality that I have is called the body code, and that's under emotional healing, energy healing. We have people that actually do bioenergetic energy healing. This young woman is all the way from South Africa. That's one of the countries we're in. And it can all be done on Zoom. It can all be done by distance. So this is a
Wow.
virtual global hub, Kathy. Virtual global
Okay, so
hub.
I'm
I'll
going to
say
wrap my
that
head with a
again.
virtual, like, because when I think about things like Reiki, for example, that's a very person-centered in order to be able to do that work. And anything that requires touch would be very difficult, obviously, to do over Zoom. So tell us, I want to know more because I first of all, I love the fact that it's not local, it's everywhere, it's worldwide, it's global, healing the world. Uh, but for our listeners, I'm curious on how that work is done. Is it like shit? All I can do is say share.
Okay, I will. So the practitioner that I just mentioned from South Africa, she's also a Reiki practitioner.
Mhm.
And and again, this is not something that, you know, we have been educated around, but energy is energy. And
Fair enough.
energy goes everywhere. And actually, that was a big aha for me when I started to actually do my energy work over Zoom. because up to the point of the pandemic, I'd only ever seen my clients in person.
Yeah.
So there is many things that I'm grateful for that the pandemic brought us, even though we don't feel necessarily that our world is coming together. Certainly in 2020, there was more of a collaboration, I want to call it, of people, and certainly from a holistic point of view and from the energy and the emotional point of view, people were really getting together. And so the reason I created the Healing Institute, I had thought that I would maybe have a building here in my small little city on Vancouver Island, which is Parksville, for anybody who's wondering. And I was looking around for a building, and that was in the fall of 2019. And then, of course, as we know what happened in 2020,
Mm.
and I had to leave my office that was downtown and go home because everything was shut down. Well, amazingly, I started meeting holistic practitioners on these virtual networking platforms all over the world. And that's when I thought, we could do this globally. We could make a real impact. We could very much make a difference in world health. And so that's where when I designed the Healing Institute. So yes, we can do Reiki over Zoom or over the phone. The energy goes everywhere. And that is something that I'm still in the process of educating people about how in fact the energy works. And other practitioners, that I've talked to, we've all kind of taken aback by the fact that yes, although we understand energy and we understand it moves, and maybe everybody doesn't know this, but we actually have an energetic grid that goes throughout the world. So when you think that you're connected to somebody, you actually are via this energetic grid. But that's not something that's kind of mainstream that we know about. So it's all part
Absolutely.
of our teaching. Yeah. So we don't actually design courses as of yet. Some of the practitioners have their own workshops and webinars and courses that they do. We haven't got that on the platform yet. That's something that'll be coming. It's still in the works for designing. But definitely we want people to know that we have these amazing, amazing holistic modalities where people can be well and stay well on their health journey.
Well, and I think that for people that I have my listeners know most of the people that I surround my life with are very well aware that I've had an autoimmune disease for many, many, many years. And, I've gone through any number of different ways of trying to find a healthful solution. And recently, thankfully, in the last couple of years, I found one that's working very well for me. But, in the process of that discovery, what I learned is that so many of these modalities really do require an open mind, and B, the opportunity to really understand, as you pointed out, that energy is everywhere. Some of this kind of medicine has been done for thousands of years, long before we had pharmaceuticals.
Oh, definitely. Yes. Our indigenous community was teaching this and doing this centuries ago. And for whatever reason, as white Anglo-Saxons, we decided that it was not worth. Now we're all back to, doing plant medicine and growing our own herbs. And really, we should have been in the position of listening to what our indigenous communities were telling us, because they had it right. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't
absolutely.
agree with you more. Absolutely true. And it's interesting too, because when you think about how the energy works within us, and the way that for many years there was the law of attraction kind of conversation, and that you would, by really focusing on not only the physical realm, but also on our spiritual realm, that we were able to sort of find how we could bring the positivity to us together. And so I found it really quite inspiring when you said about COVID being a positive thing, because I'm in agreement with you. I thought it was a very good thing, as almost a reset, right? To
Mhm.
start our process again. And I think we needed that.
I agree. The world was spinning too fast, and I actually believe the reason COVID hit us, we had the pandemic, was because God and the universe was telling us we had to slow down.
Yeah.
And so we were not slowing down. So I sort of equate it to the 2x4 up the side of the head. You know,
Eh,
when you're not listening,
absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
gotta do
I,
something to make people listen.
I'm a huge believer in that. I remember watching Oprah years ago, like way back, probably, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. I'm done thing is that that's how long ago I had this vision of Oprah when she was saying, sometimes in the beginning, I think it was Maya Angelou who had said it to her, the universe will tap on your door and just kind of give you a little knock, knock, knock. You don't listen, it'll knock, knock, knock. You don't listen, knock, knock, knock. You don't listen, knock, knock. And it goes on and on and on, right? Until finally that door is kicked out and, the world, we have to pay attention to all of these things. What brought you to this work?
Well, that's a great question. So about 25 years ago, I was personally in a very unhappy place. And I knew um, that I needed to actually look within myself to make me. I knew, if you had met me back then, you would have thought I had it all. I was financially okay. I lived in a lovely house. I had young children, which was all good, but I was unhappy inside. There was no joy. And I'm really a very joyful person and have been
Hmm.
all my life.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I was, the city I was living in at the time, I was an entrepreneur because I had a event planning company, and so I was doing a lot of networking, and I was at this women's luncheon one day and got introduced to my teacher. I call her my teacher, who actually taught me the language around energy and vibrational healing, and that's one of the names. My other company is called Vibrational Healing, and so I actually ended up studying under her for 8 years before I moved
Wow.
back to Vancouver Island. And she gave me the language. I always had sort of intuition. I didn't know what that was called. I always, I was very sensitive. I often say, what you got in trouble for as a child is really your gift. So I got in trouble for being too sensitive. I was always crying too much. I was, taking on too many of my friends' issues, and I was always asking too many questions. And so that, of course, curiosity has always been a huge thing for me. I'm always wanting to learn more. And so when I was studying under her and found that I was getting this language that was making sense to me, I just wanted more and more and more. Now, when I was moving back to Vancouver Island, because I grew up here, so when I say I moved back, that was 18 years ago now. She told me that I was going to be doing something like the healing that she had taught me, and I just went, "Excuse me, I'm going to what?" It was, because for me at the time, it was just me working on me. It
Yeah.
was not. I had never in a million years thought that I would turn into a business. But because of what she taught me, and I'll just briefly mention chakra balancing, which a lot of people are familiar with,
Mhm.
where any of the photos that you see or pictures that you see, images that you see, usually are the chakras kind of aligned with from your crown chakra down to your root chakra, like they're part of our body,
Mhm.
which they
Mhm.
are. But she taught us that our chakras went in waves, like
Mm.
our electromagnetic field. And so it was waves of vertical, waves of horizontal. And when we were balancing our chakras, and we also used the Bach Flower Remedy book, it was a book. We didn't need actually the remedies themselves, but we used the energy from the book. And we were balancing our chakras in the right color coordination that they should have been. Well, all of that just really helped me feel more grounded. I was finally getting my joy back into my life. And that's, then when you are joyful, that's who you are. That's who you turn out to be. And so I was working when I first moved to Parksville. I was working at a resort here in town. And my coworkers were kind of like, what is with you?
Yes.
And so I started explaining to them that I did an energy balance before I came to work. And they're, you do a what? And so I'm like, well, yes, we all have energy. And, and I was trying to explain to them. And they were like, we need to know more about this. So I was taking a trip back to Edmonton, where I had met, where I had studied with my teacher, and made an appointment with her to tell her that her prediction was coming through. And now what do I do? And I still remember this to this day. She went into her credenza, she pulled out all of these papers, she photocopied them, she gave them to me, and these were things that I had already studied with her, and she just gave them to me and said, I need people like you out there telling other people how to be joyful in their life. And so she pretty much gave me carte blanche to use her material. And that's how I started teaching about energy balance and realigning belief systems and healing past lifetime energy out of my house. I just
My
started there.
goodness. It's so exciting actually that you meet somebody who's so kindred and can help you on your
Mhm.
journey, and to have such beautiful mentorship to not only sort of teach you, but then here are the tools so that you can continue this legacy and push it forward. I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm forever grateful for her.
oh, I'm sure. And do you still see her? Like, do you connect with her from
No,
time
I
to
haven't.
time?
Yeah, unfortunately, she's stopped working. She's probably in her
Mm,
late 80s, early 90s now.
mm,
So
mm,
she's not
mm.
doing any more teaching. She had a classroom and everything. Um, and so, yeah, so I haven't been in touch with her for a while. She's kind of stepped back. I think she feels like she's done her work, and now the rest of us are out in the world um, carrying on her legacy.
But you know what? It just reminds me of a wonderful old Breck commercial, right? You tell two people who tell two more, who tell two more, and so on and so on and so on. And so there's something quite wonderful about sharing knowledge. And I know that when people think about self-care, they often think that they are being selfish by taking some time for themselves. But really, people that are very self-aware are people that have actually done the work. Can we talk a little bit about the process? It's an ongoing practice regardless of what practice you have, but can you sort of help people to understand, well, like, how do you go from not being to happy in a fairly short period of time?
Well, I don't know, 8 years was a short period of time, but
I
I'm
don't know
probably
about that
learning along the
either.
way.
Well, and that's the point, right? It's not an overnighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're a generation of it has to be a quick fix, and it's not always a quick fix. And so certainly learning how to meditate, learning how to just sit with your emotions, good, bad, or indifferent, just to be with them. But we're not taught that. And I'm glad you brought up the self-care, because as women, for the most part, certainly in my generation, we're taught that self-care was
Mhm.
selfish and self-centered. Anything we did for ourselves was being very selfish. And so it's a whole paradigm shift. You've got to rethink that. You've got to recondition your DNA that doing something for yourself is it's not selfish. But I think being raised by mothers who went through the depression and the war, and grandmothers that, that's my grandmother, who I'm named after, her first house was a sod hut on the bald prairie. So they weren't used to asking for what they wanted. They were grateful for what they could get at the time. And so that has sent us, the next generation of women, into that dilemma. And so I often refer to us as pioneers. We are paving the way, just as my grandmother was a pioneer on the bald prairie. I believe our generation are pioneers in changing the thought process
Yeah,
of
I agree. I
yeah.
1,000% agree with you. And I've seen some systemic changes in the way that women look after other women, and the way that women are now starting to sort of understand that, that the adage of getting into the airplane and putting on your mask first,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
have
mhm.
to be able to fill your own cup in order to be able to take because the business of living, it's hard work. It's hard work, right?
Well, it's
People,
work. It's work.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, you have to, I believe I mean, I read a lot. As you can see, this is just one bookcase in my house. I read a lot of people that I admire who have done, other, are more maybe philosophical,
Mhm.
but still that are looking at the deepness of how we can improve not only ourselves, but when you are joyful, then you do want to serve. You do want to help other people. You do want society to be in a better place. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to really inside look at what is it that's irritating you, or why this person said that a certain thing, and why was that a trigger, and do some analysis. We don't really do that kind of analysis. We just kind of
Yes.
accept it or blow it off or don't think it's important. But that's the inner work, I believe, that you need to do in order to really understand exactly when these emotions come up. Don't run away from them. They're emotion. And of course, I see that in the work that I do with clients with the body code and the emotion code, is they've stuffed these emotions down. They're now balls of negative energy stuck in their subconscious and in their bodies. And if they're going to be stuck in your body, they're going to create dis-ease. And that we do not want. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that for so many people at this stage of our lives right now, there's a lot of people that are no longer hostage to some of those more poisonous thoughts. I think people are now ready to say, just a minute now, I need to figure out why this is bothering me. Let me process this, because I think that people that don't process that, as you said, there is dis-ease in the world, and then that magnifies itself. So if we can work it out, and then joy offers the opportunity for other people to be joyful, right? We
Absolutely.
just we're moving that dial in a much more positive light. You talked about the body code. I'm curious about that. But before we start talking about that, I'm going to get you to think on that for a second. For if you've just joined us on CHLY 101.7 FM, I'm Kathy Holmes. I am just always so happy to be with you. And I really appreciate that you tune in every Monday at 1 o'clock to our program here on CHLY. But I'm also super grateful when you tune into us at iHeartRadio and Spotify, or you watch us on our YouTube channel. The information that we share is about our community, for our community, and for anyone universally who wants to get a little bit more information about how to live a better life. So we're super glad that you're able to be with us for this program specifically, because Permelia Parham is in the Zoom booth with me today. She's going to give us our contact information in a few minutes, but you'll need to go get a piece of paper and a pen in order to be able to write that down. So I'm going to invite you to do that while we're chatting about the body code. Tell us a little bit more about that. I've heard of the body code, but I don't really understand it.
Well, when I was introduced to it, it just made perfect sense based on the energy study that I had been doing. So when I was mentioning about our electromagnetic field, that is all part of looking at what the body code does. So basically, for those of you who would like to know a little bit more, you can just Google body code or Dr. Bradley Nelson. Dr. Bradley Nelson was the chiropractor who was in his office for many years, and would see his patients, and they would go away and he would adjust them, they would go away and they kept coming back. And so one day he said to his wife, there's more than going on here. It's not just physical, it's got to be emotional. So he's a very connected to source man. He's a beautiful man. And so he's got lots of videos out there, YouTube videos out there, so you can watch him. And he then came up with the idea that people trap their emotions or have their emotions trapped. He calls them trapped emotions, and they're in the subconscious. Now, this is another area that we're not educated around. Our subconscious is probably 95% of what goes on with us. Our conscious brain, which we're taught is the big deal, is like 5%. So if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know that these emotions are trapped in your subconscious, and I call them, they could be running the show and you don't even know that, it's really the 5% of our conscious brain that we need to unpack what those trapped emotions are, so we can consciously be aware of them. So it's
Mhm.
always good to be consciously aware of what your emotions are. But if you don't even know that they're stuck in your subconscious due to whatever, could be due to an incident that happened, an accident that happened, something even as young as a very young child, and you don't even remember what it was. And that's what I love about this modality, because you don't have to remember. Dr. Bradley Nelson gives his book away to anybody who has suffered any kind of PTSD, because it works so well with PTSD, because you don't have to remember the incident. We just find the trapped emotion and release it. So then, brilliant that he is, he came up with a chart of 60 trapped emotions. And so as practitioners, we use this chart. And then again, as the three components of a session is to connect with the client's subconscious, with the client's permission, obviously, and also to then use our muscles again. So our subconscious is true to who we are. Our muscles are true to who we are. So to find out what the trapped emotions are, or in the body code, it's an app that I have on my tablet, we muscle test. So because the client has given me permission to be their proxy, I do the work for them. And so because I'm connected to their subconscious, so my muscle, when I'm muscle testing, or you can use a pendulum, it's telling me the truth. It's telling me the truth about what it is about the client, that, and depending also on what the client wants to work on. And again, it can be physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. And then to release the trapped emotion, we have a little magnet we run over our governing meridian, and that connects to the electromagnetic field, which is our aura, which is again true to who we are. And the magnetic quality of the magnet connecting to the electromagnetic field is stronger than the trapped emotion. So it releases the trapped emotion.
So, and again, forgive me because I'm confused a little tiny bit. Because when I think about the aura, I think about aura changing as our moods change. So when I'm hearing you talk about the electromagnetic changing along with it, is this not just the ability to say, I am not going to be unhappy any longer, a mental, physical promise to the self to say, I'm not going to live this experience now? And the reason I'm confused is because I see a lot of people that are incredibly positive people, some of the most positive, wonderful, happy on the outside at any rate, maybe not as much that they're sharing on the inside. We don't always know what's going on for someone in that deep subconscious state, as you pointed out. So, but how does our mind not actually say, you know, I don't want to feel this physical
Mm-hmm.
Manifestation of something that really I'm happy and my back still hurts. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I totally do, and it's a great question. So to answer that question, it's not always the emotions that they're trapped emotions. Obviously, they're these balls of negative energy. That's how
Mm-hmm,
Dr. Bradley Nelson describes them,
mm-hmm,
and they are stuck in the subconscious. They're also in our bodies. So we can get these emotions trapped. There's different kinds of trapped emotions. So you can inherit them. So those of us that have had, I look at the generations of trauma that we've had trauma, or I often relate to my maternal grandfather who fought at Vimy Ridge in World War I, who came home and never talked about it.
yeah.
That emotion could have been a generational emotion that got passed on to me.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and I could pass it on. It's inherited. It could
mm-hmm,
pass it
yeah,
on
I
to,
understand. Mm-hmm,
yeah.
yeah.
There's another trapped emotion called prenatal, which means something was going on with your mother when she was pregnant with you. You got the trapped emotion. I never think that's fair, but that is another trapped emotion. You can absorb a trapped emotion from somebody. There's one called the heart wall. So our subconscious is always looking out for us because it's true to who we are, and it'll put an invisible wall around our heart. But if any of those emotions get stuck in that wall, it's called a heart wall emotion. So yeah, it's really very fascinating that this could happen. And also we're looking at this intergenerational, could be
Mm-hmm,
trauma, It could be whatever we're finding. And so even though our conscious brain might be somewhat aware of it, I use the analogy of an iceberg. So what's above the water is what's in our conscious brain, and what's below the water is what's in our
Yeah, it's a much
subconscious.
deeper picture for sure. And it isn't seen because that's the point of it being subconscious.
Right.
How do people tap into their subconscious?
They just allow me to do that. So I mean,
Oh, I
anybody
don't
who.
mean I don't mean you tapping in. I mean if a person when they're doing their work is wanting to
Mhm.
tap into their
I
subconscious,
see.
right? We understand our consciousness is about 5% of our brain. Like, you know, there but to tap into that subconscious state, I can see where a practitioner would be able to guide you through that and help you through that. But I'm curious of whether people can actually tap into it themselves and do some
Absolutely.
of that work, and what does that maybe look like?
Well, meditation, definitely.
Yeah.
Sitting with yourself and whatever feelings are coming up or emotions that are coming up,
Hmm.
not chasing them away, looking at them to see, okay, is this my emotion?
Hmm.
Why was I triggered by this emotion? What happened just now? Did somebody say something to me? Did I have a memory that triggered this emotion? What was that memory? Like doing a bit of an evaluation, we have to kind of do some research around why it is that we felt that way. And
Hmm.
oftentimes it'll be something that you might remember, about a certain incident or something happened, or maybe when you were a child, you were chastised for something
Hmm.
that that maybe wasn't your fault, but you got in trouble for it for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And yeah, we have to do a little bit of analysis on ourselves often, just to find out what it was. And usually by doing that, you'll realize that, oh, well, really, that was not a big deal. But you
Yeah.
got triggered, and then so now consciously you can release whatever that was. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that whole trigger piece, and I resonate with it because I think about kids that are when they're going to school, right? They're in their formative years, and maybe a teacher will say something or a family member will say something, and then that child, the story they tell themselves for the rest of their life is blank,
Exactly.
blank, blank. And so, you know, we weren't mature when we were younger. As we get older, certainly hindsight's 2020 when you take the time to revisit it. But it's also true, I think, that once you realize that that's the story you've told yourself, that you can create a new truth and a
Oh,
new story,
you can
correct?
create a brand new story.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So of all it, because you've been obviously doing this for some time now, right? And
Mhm.
you've gone through, you've done it yourself. So it's eight months. It's, I believe in life experience and that people can really, you know, share from people that have already gone before them, that have gone through this work. What was the toughest part about actually doing the soul search?
Coming up with some, decisions that I had made that weren't serving me anymore. That's one of the reasons why I was not joyful, because I had made some decisions that weren't serving me. And also realizing that I could now make a different decision. It wasn't easy because it was a 20-year marriage that I was in,
Mhm.
that I had chosen to leave,
Yeah.
because not just, and I don't want it to sound superficial in that the marriage wasn't serving me. It was because of the dynamics of the relationship that I was in this very uh, depressed state. And so it's not an easy thing ever to leave any kind of relationship.
No,
But
not
when
at
you
all.
realize that, and my children were quite young still, and I certainly didn't want them to have any trauma around
Yeah.
their parents splitting up. But it was almost like it wasn't a choice. There was only one choice to make, and that was looking after me and making sure that I was going to be in a happier state. And honestly, Kathy, I don't believe I'd be doing the work I'm doing today if I hadn't made that decision.
Well, and I think the gift is in that too, right? I think that there's,
Yes.
you know, we're not in the same time period anymore. I'm not encouraging divorces. I'm a divorcee myself, not once, but twice. I don't love it. You know, my first marriage was 14, my second was 10 years. I felt like give it a good college try. But sometimes the trauma, the deep trauma that I may have even been born into myself, made decisions. I created decisions. I created a life. I have no regrets. It made me a stronger human for what I am. But there comes a point sometimes when you have to say, look, I know that the trajectory that my life is on right now, this life is very short. Whether or not people come back and we're reincarnated and all, that's a whole nother conversation. But whatever all of that looks like to any individual of what our life looks like, it's a pretty short time that we have. And so without being selfish, we can't live in trauma over a long history and expect to have any kind of joy. So I think that it's courageous to leave
Well, and
sometimes
I
when you
wanted
need
to
to.
be more joyful for my children. I wanted
Yes.
to be in that place, and I'm very fortunate that I have a wonderful relationship with my children.
Yeah.
And and so that worked out all right. And be in service. I as I was doing that studying with my teacher for 8 years, I realized I wanted to be more in service. I wanted that I was here on this planet, in this incarnation at this time for a reason. And I
Yeah.
was very open to finding out what that
Yeah.
might be. And
Yeah.
so I was just very, very curious as to how that was going to play out.
And
And
I'm to me, that's the best part, is the curiosity, right? It's the opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, who am I now? Where is this going to go? And to be able to help others is a direct consequence. And by the way, I wasn't trying to be voyeuristic in your life or have people voyeuristic in mine. That's not the premise. But the premise is that everybody comes to a decision for a reason. And look what wonderful things can happen. However, that decision turns out, we just become more where
that's right.
life is what it is. It's a wonderful thing. Do you have a favorite modality that a preference of modalities that you like to work with yourself?
Oh, that's not an easy question. um,
Love it.
Well, I love the body code. I really, I have intuition. I tap into my intuition with my clients continuously all the time. I didn't know what the language was. I was always intuitive, even as a small child,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I was doing. Now, at least I have language for it, and
That's important.
yeah, very important. But I also, the other modalities that I work with my clients is realigning a belief system. So
Mhm.
we are raised with different kinds of beliefs, whether it's through our family, whether it's society has said, you should do this or you should be this. And at some point, I always encourage my clients to look at those beliefs and are they serving you? And if they're not serving you, then let's release that belief, or we want to incorporate a new belief actually
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to negate the old belief so that it's not, again, not running the show. I love doing that. I also do healing past lifetimes, which is again the process that my teacher taught us how to do in the classroom.
Mhm.
And that's really amazing. I've done a lot of research on my own past lifetimes. So that was that was, I really enjoy doing that. I would say certainly some of the modalities that we have on the Healing Institute. I have a beautiful young woman from Portland, Oregon. She does conscious breath. She's a conscious
Oh,
breath facilitator, and so I've taken some of her breathing techniques, which are really really beautiful. And we have a number of other people that are doing coaching parents, coaching families, coaching at the educational system. There's one of our practitioners who's a registered clinical counselor. And for anybody who might want to hop on the LinkedIn Live Heal the World show, which is 9 a.m. on Friday morning, these are the interviews that you'll find there with these practitioners. And we talk about not just about them and what they do, or how they can help, but they give actual concrete evidence of their clients and the results that their clients get from working with them. So yeah.
I love that you have this podcast through LinkedIn, or is it a podcast, or it's a webinar, or?
It is apparently a podcast.
It's a podcast. There you go. Podcast. It's the language piece, right? Because,
Yes.
to me, I'm doing a radio show, and then the radio show gets on iHeartRadio and Spotify, and therefore it's a podcast. So
Podcast.
I don't know how to wrap my head around all of that.
When
Those
I
little
started
pieces.
it, I hadn't thought that it was a podcast. I just was LinkedIn Live. I'm doing a LinkedIn Live. I'm interviewing the practitioners on LinkedIn Live for half an hour on a
That's
Friday morning.
great.
And then I met another gentleman who does podcasts all the time. He says, you're doing a podcast. And I'm like, oh, good, because I really wanted to do a podcast. So, and now I can channel it through all the Facebook channels and LinkedIn, as well as my YouTube channel. So yeah. No,
Well, you just made an absolutely perfect segue, because we've already told people to go get a piece of paper and a pen. So by now, hopefully they've got something there. LinkedIn Learning is a big part of it. How'd you like to share your information so people can find you?
Absolutely. Where would you like me to put it?
Well, so for our radio listeners, we'll have to say
Yes.
it. Of
Okay.
course,
We'll
those
have to
people
just
that are
say.
watching
All
us,
right.
it's a little different. It'll be in the chat box.
So the website is Da Healing Institute, but it's got hyphens between Da and Healing and Institute. So it's www.da-healing-institute.com. Our email address is info@da-healing-institute.com. And the LinkedIn Lives you'll find under my profile on LinkedIn, and it's just under my name, Permelia Parham. You'll find that.
And for our listeners, I'll make sure that is at the bottom of the YouTube channel, so that in the
Wonderful.
chat
Thank
box
you.
you'll be able to find that
Yeah.
information for sure. So I really do appreciate you telling us these things and sharing your point of view. And now I hate to ask you this question, because I don't but I can hear some of our listeners. I hear family members, and it's an uncomfortable question. And yes, I know that I'm setting it up that way, because there's a lot of people that think about that this stuff is a bunch of hokey. What do you say to people that are negative Nellies, that just think that this is all woo woo, and that there's, what's your thought?
Well, because I believe you need to be curious. If your life is not working the way you would like it to work, then why not try something different? There's no harm in trying something slightly different. And maybe this is not how you've been raised, and maybe this isn't information that you've had during your life, but obviously you're listening to this show. So you're going to be learning new ways of being. And I would just say, be curious, find out, go check it out, do some research. That's usually my piece of advice. Find out why. And especially when you're in a place where you're not happy, or you're not feeling joyful, or there's something that's bothering you, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever it is that is a little bit off for you, just consider it. Consider something different.
I think considering something different is ever so important, but more importantly, I love that you believe in the curiosity component, because, you're right. If you've been living your life for a long time the same way, and the results are not changing, it might be worth your while to take a few moments to really self-reflect and figure out, well, if I just thought about this, or tried this, what's the harm, right? A few minutes, couple of hours, and then you can make a decision from there. What is, from your perspective, for those people that have not ever had these kinds of experiences, is there and I know that there's no one shoe fits all. That's not that life's just not like that. But is there a place where someone can just begin beyond the be curious, like to sort of help people to test the water? How would you suggest that they go about figuring out where to begin?
Well, I'm always open to having a discussion with people. Just, I love meeting people. I love educating, helping people find their way, whether we call it education or whatever, just having a dialogue.
Yeah.
That's my part of my service, is to help people find their way. So I invite people to come to contact me to find out. I would suggest going to your local library or your local bookstore, looking in the metaphysical section. Look for something that really takes your attention. Don't
Mhm.
just buy any old book, because it's gonna, it's gonna sit on your shelf or on your table, and you're never gonna read it. So look through some books to read, or go on YouTube and listen to some videos, or go on Spotify, and some breathing breathing things you want to listen to, or other kinds of podcasts around health and wellness. Just explore what those are, because you will find what you're looking for, even though you don't know what that is yet. But it'll be attracted to you.
Yes. Yeah. And they always say the teacher will come when the student is ready, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's what happened to me 25 years ago. Was the I just was introduced to this woman. I don't think she ever went to that women's luncheon ever again. It just happened to be that day that she and I were both there, and I met her. And then got introduced to her, and then found out more about what she did. And that was very, we can call it synchronicity, but it was meant to be, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big believer that the teacher comes through at the right time. I know it to be true myself. I know that as well, breathing is a big part of it. I think that breathing and intuition are the two things that we take for granted and don't listen to enough. I know for my experiences when I've gone through some of the tough stuff, right, including my divorce, it took a while for me to understand how important it was to breathe, or how to let go of some of the anxiety and the fear and all of the things that were going on at the time in my life. So, and then once I got in touch with the breath, because I kept thinking, I can't meditate, my brain won't be quiet. Like, how do you do this? Right. But just even focusing on your breath a moment at a time has,
Takes you.
makes such a big, important part.
Yeah.
I I think first of all, it's important that you give your information again. So I'm going to ask you please to share your website and all of that stuff one more time. We're nearing the end of the program. I can't believe it's already been almost an
Wow.
hour. Oh my gosh, it's like boom. But I think we've really shared some important stuff here. And I'm very delighted that you've been on the program today to hopefully help open some eyes on what it is you do and how people can heal themselves through the Healing Institute, and to find out more about these practitioners. But I also very much appreciate that you were really vulnerable in sharing your life story as well, the parts of it, so that people hopefully can see themselves in you as well. I think that that sometimes gives people just a little bit of extra courage to try something and be curious about it when maybe they hadn't been before. So I honor that, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for that. So share with us the information, and then we'll get on with a couple more things that I want to talk to you about.
Okay. So the Healing Institute website is www.the-healing-institute.com. Our email is info@the-healing-institute.com. And you can reach me at Permelia Parham on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to give my phone number. So it's 250-240-2656. So give me a call, even just to say hi.
That's fantastic. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. I know our listeners do as well, and I'll be sure to make sure that that contact information is available. So my favorite part of the program, though, it just is the those kernels of wisdom. I think that we gave people a few little kernels, but if you could, uh, share what you feel would be, a great teaching, a great life lesson, what might that look like for you?
Well, I've already said it. So I think the curiosity mostly, um, asking questions. Always ask questions. Always try to find, I think that's why we get ourselves into trouble, is because we don't ask enough questions. So whether it's from a health and wellness point of view or a lifestyle point of view, ask those questions. Find the people that will, yeah, just ask the questions, because the people will show up who are going to answer those questions for you. So always be curious, ask your questions, do your research. Just don't take anything at face value, because what might work for somebody may not work for you. So it's very, very important to make sure that what the decisions you're making you're making them for you. You're not taking somebody else's decision and trying to make it work for you.
Or someone else's trauma, right? As you
Yes,
talked to so
definitely.
much about the generational trauma, right? We don't want to
Mhm.
bring with us stuff that we can
No.
actually put those suitcases down. You don't have to carry them forever, all over the place for sure. Thanks again for being with me today. I know you also can be found at health and wellness fairs as well. And I know Teresa Osman, who also has the
Mhm.
Wellness Hub and Wellness Wednesdays. I know that she has just done the Nanaimo Senior Services Network, and I know that there's the Oceanside networks and there's all of that stuff. Are you at most of the community health and wellness shows?
Most of them, yes. As a matter of fact, I was just at the Nanaimo in Essence and Wellness Fair on last Wednesday, and so that was very, very cool. We really got to meet a lot of amazing people as they came through. I usually am at Teresa's, whatever Teresa does.
I know
I'm
she's just
usually
so
there.
great.
I'm
Yeah.
also write an article every month for the Wellness News, so you can look for me there.
Oh, that's great news. I will make sure that we link to that as well. Fantastic.
Mhm.
Wellness news. Thanks, Teresa. You do such great work. So anyway, she's also on our television program for Act 3. She does the Wellness Minute on Act 3 on Shaw's Community Spotlight. And of course, our latest edition is out right now, and we are delighted that people are watching it and having a good time with it as well. I don't believe you were on our last one, but you were on the one before. So thanks for
It's
being
on
our
the Women's Day one back in, what
exactly.
was it, March?
A while ago now,
It was a
but you
while ago,
can,
yeah.
people can go back and watch those episodes, of
Yeah.
course, when they come to
Yeah,
YouTube.
and Teresa actually she interviewed me, so
She did so.
that
She
was
did a
fun.
great job. It was a great interview. All right, everybody, that does it for us on CHLY 101.7 FM. Again, I'm Kathy Holmes. I'm your host of Act 3. Always delighted to be with you. Thank you so much to our guest, Permelia Parham from the Healing Institute. Please make sure you check her out, because I know you want to. I want you to anyway. If you haven't already, it's something to do this afternoon. So please enjoy your day. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Act 3.